Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be doing my May reading wrap up. Before I get started, again, just apologies for the sound. I'm working on things. You can see I have a bookshelf back here, but nothing is still really set up in this room. Slow progress, but slow progress going along. So I'm doing my best with lighting and sound and all of that stuff, but still a work in progress as I figure out the situation here in my new house. So in the month of May, I read a total of 3 books, and that's partially the whole transitioning into a new stage of life situation that's happening, and therefore I'm not reading as much, but also partially because the first book took me a really long time to get through for a variety of reasons, which I will also get into when I talk about the book. One of them was a reread, and then I read a shorter book at the end of the month. And I have a lot of opinions about all of these different books, so let's jump into it. So the first book that I finished in the month of May was Age of Vice by Deepti Kapoor. This is a book that I kind of had my eye on a little bit when it came out earlier this year. I had been seeing relatively positive buzz about it. It sounded really interesting. So the story begins with this man named AJ or Ajay. I feel like I need to say Ajay because that's how in my head an Indian name spelled this way is pronounced. So it starts off with this character named Ajay, and he's being arrested and interviewed by the police, and something major has happened. He has killed someone or is being alleged of killing someone, and then the police come in and basically say oh, you're being released, we didn't realize you work for Sunny Wadia. And then the story from there jumps back in time, and you see a little bit about Ajay's upbringing in poverty in India and sort of his life leading up to working for this specific person. And so when I started this book, I found this really interesting. It was interesting for a couple of different reasons. One, seeing how Ajay's life changed from growing up in poverty and what led him to working for this man and what working for this man really looks like. And then you're also getting glimpses into this person's life who you're they're clearly not a good person. They're doing something shady here, but you're not really sure what it is. And you're seeing Ajay kind of be blind to that fact to a certain degree. And then you're also, as a reader, or at least I was, questioning whether or not Ajay actually understands what truly is happening here and whether or not he cares. Because you can see Ajay has other motivations and things like that while going through this book. And you meet these other characters who are a part of this world and how they get either brought into it or part of it or influence it and things like that. And then the POV changes, and it feels like that's when the book lost me. I was really, like I said, into this story and really interested to see sort of how the author was talking about the classes in India and the way there's just a lot of corruption and how these corrupt people have so much influence over every aspect of everyone's life, especially in certain areas. And I found Ajay as a character to be just a really fascinating person to be reading this story from. But then it starts to switch perspectives, and a couple of things happen. One, you start reliving or rereading certain scenarios that you've already read through from a different character's perspective, which sometimes is very interesting and sometimes can provide extra insight. But I found in these situations, a lot of times it didn't really provide that much more information than we already either knew, or at least I as a reader was able to infer. And then the other thing is that I found the other characters that we followed to be not as interesting or not as compelling. And so I found myself less likely to want to pick up this book because I was reading from these other characters' points of views. And part of me kept hoping that we would switch back to Ajay's perspective, but we don't really, we kind of do, but we don't really. And normally with a book like this, I was very much on the edge of giving up on this book partway through, but I desperately just wanted to see what was going to happen, how it was all going to wrap up. And for me personally, it wasn't worth it in the end. But also at the same time, I respected the author for giving kind of a realistic conclusion to this story, because there was no way for this to end in a way that is satisfying, because realistically these corruptions continue and these corrupt people continue to be in power in various ways, and even when it seems like things are going to change, they don't really. And so in the end, I just was kind of disappointed with the way everything went, and it made it so the first like 30%, 40% maybe is told from Ajay's perspective, and I found it to be compelling. And then after that, I just wanted to give up. And I'm really glad I got this book from the library because, yeah, I would have been mad if I'd paid for this book because it started out with so much promise, but just the way it continued on didn't really deliver, in my opinion. So, yeah, a little bit of a disappointing start to May, and part of the reason why it took me so long to finish literally anything that month. All right, and the second book that I finished in the month of May was Vita Nostra, and this was actually a reread for me. It's really funny because I feel like a lot of people that I've been following, I have been doing rereads of Vita Nostra, and I know that's because the sequel came out, and that's why I did a reread, but I just thought it was really funny that it felt like everyone was rereading this book. But anyways, I decided to do a reread, which is extremely rare for me. I haven't reread a book in literal years, but I knew that if I wanted to jump into the sequel, I needed to reread the first book in the series because I knew I didn't remember a lot of the details of this book, and I just remembered it being a more complicated book. And so I doubted my ability to just jump into the sequel without doing a reread first, so I did that in the month of May. I have a full review of this book up on my channel, and so I'm going to link to that in case anyone is interested in my full thoughts on this book, because I'm not going to go into all of the details here, but I will say that rereading this book was a really interesting experience for me personally for a couple of reasons. One, I realized that I only remembered like the first third of the book, and then the middle third, it was like reading a brand new book because I genuinely did not remember what had happened or what happened to these characters over the course of this story. And I was also very surprised because I felt like I had more of a negative reaction to this book a second time around. I don't know, it's just something about it didn't vibe as much with me the second go around, but I still like enjoyed it in the end, and I'm very intrigued to see what's going to happen in the sequel. It was like so much more heady and philosophical than I remember it being, and I knew it was that way already. But yeah, it was just like really interesting rereading this book because I feel like I didn't love it as much the second time around, but I still enjoyed it enough to want to go on to the sequel. So hopefully I'll be picking up the sequel relatively soon because I want to read it while it's still fresh. But this is definitely like one of the more unique series that I've read in a really long time. And the final book that I finished in the month of May is a relatively short one, and that is Foster by Claire Keegan. I actually picked this book up because someone left it as a recommendation in my previous video. So I have a reading vlog that should be coming out relatively soon. It's already been recorded. And what I decided to do was read some of the books that y'all recommended to me. And so this is the only one I'll be talking about in this video. The rest you'll have to check out that vlog to see what else got picked. But this was an absolute delight. I did not have this book on my radar at all. I've never read anything by Claire Keegan before. I wasn't really hearing very much about it, but someone left a comment and was like, I recently read Foster and thoroughly enjoyed it, and I completely understand why. This is probably considered a novella. It's relatively short, and you could read it all in one sitting if you wanted to. It's a very beautiful story following this young girl who lives in rural Ireland, and her parents basically drop her off at her aunt and uncle's house for the summer because they have a lot of kids and their mother is expecting another baby. And so basically they're like dropping her off at her aunt and uncle's to get some help so they don't have to worry about her as much. And they're like, we'll pick you back up when school begins. And so you basically just follow her as she like lives with this couple who are able to provide her with a lot more love and attention that her biological parents are able to provide for her. And you see sort of her working through that. Despite the fact that this is a really short book, there is a lot of depth of emotions in this story that I think is really, really well done. This book makes me want to pick up more Claire Keegan stuff. It's very bittersweet and very beautiful. And I just thought it was a really, really well done book. Like, this was clearly the favorite of the 3 books that I read, but this is honestly probably going to end up on my favorites of the year list. Like, I was very moved by this story, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're looking for something like relatively quick to pick up. this would be a great one to check out. So yeah, that is everything I have to talk about in this video. Relatively quick, but I didn't read that many books in the month of May. But June is off to a pretty good start, so I have high hopes for future videos and things like that. I've also been working on videos, but you know, it all takes some time to get back into the swing of things, get back into editing regularly again and recording regularly again, but I'm hopeful that, you know, I'll be getting back into it. Also, I know in my last video I mentioned that I wanted to do a Q&A in the month of May. Obviously that didn't happen, but I still want to do one. So if you have any questions that you wanted to ask me that you didn't leave in the previous video comments, feel free to leave it in the comment section here. Or as always, feel free to leave any questions or comments you have about any of the books that I talked about here, if you read any of them or have any feelings about any of them, or feel free to leave me any book recommendations or just tell me what your favorite book was that you read in the month of May. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.